Hey, good morning, team. It is Tuesday, October 8th. I'm Amy Corr. I'm here with Kevin Van Eck, and we are excited to be back for another episode.
Super excited.
We've got an interesting topic today. It's going to be talking about raising our EQ. That's right, not IQ, but EQ.
EQ.
Yeah. So grab your coffee. I hope it's hot. This is like the pumpkin spice latte season,
Oh my goodness,
right?
is. Yes, I have not had a pumpkin spice yet, and I may not this year.
Oh,
I don't know.
My
We'll
daughters
see.
love them.
Do you like them?
I do, but too many calories for me to drink them on a regular basis.
every day.
So
Right.
treat only.
It's a lot.
Yes.
There you go.
Well, whether it's a pumpkin spice latte or just a plain coffee with a little bit of cream, I don't know what you've got.
Black.
Yours is
Black
black.
coffee.
Okay.
Yep.
Whatever it may be, grab it and let's jump into the next episode of Coffee with Amy and Kevin.
Let's do it. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning.
All right, we're going to have a great one today. We're going to talk about EQ, like you
That's
said.
right.
EQ. So EQ was a buzzy term a number of years ago,
Yeah.
right? It felt like there were books. There was everything about it. It hasn't gone away. It's maybe just not as buzzy. And you still see concepts of EQ, whether it's on social or in new books being written. It's really important in our business. So let's talk about what EQ is. EQ is emotional intelligence.
Yep.
And by definition, it's the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions while also being able to recognize, understand, and manage and influence the emotions of others.
Yep.
So it's being able to reflect on yourself and being able to understand what other people are giving off to you and reacting appropriately. So in the real estate business, this applies clearly to our
Every day,
I mean,
every moment, every
yes,
second.
It's so important because the way we interact with others drives our business, our success, our relationships with clients, but also with other agents. That's really important too. Sometimes we really focus on clients, but all this drives relationships with agents, which is so important too.
Yeah, well, we say relationships with agents. I'm also going to say relationships with people that matter in our lives, like our family.
Yes.
You know, because this is such a stressful job. Let's admit it. You know, it's an amazing career, but with it brings a lot of 24/7, always being on, you know, ping-ponging, bouncing around, managing 10 balls in the air at one time. And I will say that probably our families, you know, get the brunt of that. And and I think sometimes the EQ that we push onto and focus on for so many others, that's an important group that we don't always focus on so much, right?
Good point. It's every interaction.
Yeah. So it's really just knowing. And I think what we kind of start with is really the idea of we got to start with ourselves first, right? Focusing on our own self-awareness of our EQ and also recognizing, you know, maybe I'm really good. My, you know, emotional quotient level is very high. Or maybe it's not so great. And it's something that I'm very aware that I have to work on. You know, there are people out there, I think all of us can have a short fuse from time to time, depending on what those triggers are. And we
Right.
all have those different triggers, you know, and it might be a certain thing that a client continues to do, whatever it may be. You kind of want to be aware of the fact of how am I operating? You've got to take yourself first and figure out, you know, again, what are my triggers? What are the things that I struggle with when it comes to having conversations and working through tough scenarios? You know, even things like I'm not great with conflict. I get really stressed out and I shut down. That's a big thing to be able to get comfortable with because it is the art of communicating in very tough situations.
Yes.
So I think step one then, really thinking about myself, my own sort of mindfulness of how do I manage my own emotions in lots of situations with colleagues, with clients, even with family. And then maybe taking a step back and, you know, having some mindfulness or reflection of actual specific scenarios or events where it isn't always great, but kind of to say like, I didn't do this so well.
Right.
But I think if you can take the time to figure out some of the things that you know you struggle with when it comes to this EQ concept, you can then at least have the power to figure out what are some of the things that I want to try to do to change it so that I can be more effective.
Right.
So I think it starts with us. Before we figure out kind of how to get out there and do things, reflecting on what has been my experience as it relates to EQ and my interactions with people. What do I do well? What do I need work on? And then kind of making a plan for, you know, taking steps to make it better.
I love that. Yeah, I think it's really important to reflect, because if you don't, you just keep making those mistakes like
Yeah.
you're saying.
Yeah.
So reflecting is important, and then understanding when you're in the situation, if you understand the triggers and you understand how you react in certain situations, and you have those scenarios where maybe you haven't responded or reacted in a way that made you proud, we have to put things in place to make sure when we're in that situation again, we can handle it. So you've highlighted the situations, you've highlighted the triggers. What do you do when you're in a stressful situation? So a couple of things you can do is, I think there's two key ones. One is practice breathing to calm yourself down.
Pause, like just a moment of pause.
Think about how escalated things can get when it's rapid fire and you're going quickly. So just take a moment to breathe. Breathing exercises before you go into a stressful situation or conversation. You know when they're coming. You know when you're a little bit hesitant to start dialing the phone, or you're a little bit hesitant to answer the phone when someone's calling and you know it's going to be difficult, or you're seeing someone for a difficult conversation, whether it's a client or an agent. Take a moment, breathe. Then when you're in the conversation, it is okay to pause and think for a second.
Yeah.
Because in that rapid fire environment, we oftentimes say things that we didn't mean to say, that we wish we would take back. So it's okay to pause, take a moment and breathe while you're in the conversation and come up with a thoughtful response rather than your first reaction, because a lot of times your first reaction, it's probably not the best one.
Yeah.
Especially when there's an escalating conversation and someone's escalating it. We need to be the ones that bring the conversation back down and come up with a thoughtful response.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's so critical here is not just what we're going to say, but in what medium or means by which we're going to say it. I have seen more bad case scenarios of emotions being hurt via email or via text, because even though whatever I wrote down, how I was voicing it in my head and presented it on that text message sounded super friendly and thoughtful and great, how it was received was in a completely different tone. So, part of, EQ is understanding the tone by which we are sending things or people are receiving what we're saying, right? So I love the idea of slowing down, especially if it's, live with a phone call and all of those things. But I do think also being mindful of, should I be picking up the phone and having a conversation versus sending this in an email or a text? I think that's been one of the biggest areas where I think agents have learned the hard way of that being a step that they take in lieu of the written word.
Yeah, agreed. And I think remember, it's not about what you intended to say. It's not about how you intended to mean it. It's about how it's received, because that's how that person is going to react and interpret what you said.
Yeah, because words matter. I mean, I've had scenarios where the same information is being presented, but it's in two different sentences or it's two different ways of saying it. And the reaction or the response is completely different based off of how I've presented it. So,
and understandably so.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases.
And I know we've got Phil M. Jones coming up for Expo very soon. And one of the things I'm most excited for, he's got a great book, Exactly What to Say. And it is the thoughtfulness, and it is around EQ. It's knowing how to say things in such a way that you're going to get the reaction that you want from that person on the other side. So I love that. I love that. And I think the last thing really to always remember when it is about working with clients, and this is a relationship-driven business, right? And sometimes the relationships are really tense, sometimes it's really tricky, but we're also a highly emotional industry, right? What we are helping people with is one of the most stressful things that they're ever going to do in life. It is also a lot of money on the line for pretty much everyone. And it's also very personal. This is where they're going to call home. They're either leaving a house or they're making a decision to spend so much money on what they want to be perfect for their life moving forward. And there's a lot of responsibility that goes along with that. And so I think what we need to always remember is to take a step back and empathize with the people that we are interacting with. Because I think, sometimes the way they act, that's on them. It doesn't mean that we have to engage right back. And sometimes when you can take a step back and say, the way that they're reacting has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with what's happening in their world. So I am going to make sure that I handle them with our two favorite words, kindness and care.
Love it.
Kevin and I talk about that a lot, right? When we go into tough times or we know somebody's stressed or angry or frustrated, it is taking a step back and saying, you know what? Just be kind, be caring, because you don't know what went on for them that morning that could be putting them in a stressful spot. So
Yes.
I feel like that's helped me a lot personally. I really,
Yeah.
we laugh about
Same.
it, but I always say kindness and care, kindness and care
Yes.
when I go into a conversation, and it helps set me right. So at least I know that I'm doing what I can to make sure that that interaction is as impactful as it possibly can be.
Yes, really important. Put yourself in their shoes. Understand their frame of reference and where they're coming from and why they might be reacting that way. And it's never personal against us, typically 99.9% of the time.
And they just want to be heard. That's the other thing that I've learned is sometimes when somebody is really angry, instead of being ready to just defend your side of the story, just listen to them and just let them know, I hear you.
Yes.
I hear you. I appreciate you sharing with me. I'm sorry that you're feeling that way. Really acknowledging, their emotional state will go a long way. And I think it kind of breaks down whatever, aggression or fear, whatever might be going on with them. And it makes it easier for them to then have an open conversation.
Right. You'll have a better understanding if you ask questions or listen as to how to approach them, because maybe we didn't do something great. Maybe we didn't eliminate some of the fear that comes with the big move or the big purchase or whatever it might be. Maybe we didn't make things clear. So it's an opportunity for us to backtrack, fix it, make them feel more comfortable.
Yeah, and just recognize that nobody's perfect, and acknowledging that we aren't perfect sometimes is also okay. Makes us human, makes us more relatable, and in those emotional times with people, sometimes that's all that they want.
That's right. So this week, one thing we want you to do, we want you to take one of these
Look
strategies.
in the mirror.
That's right. Look in the mirror. Pick one of these, whether it's reflecting on yourself, which is a great way to start, probably suggested. The second piece, you could choose from how you interact or react or respond in those breathing techniques or pausing during stressful situations. And there's one we didn't mention that I think you could also practice, which is role-playing a conversation before you have it.
Yep.
We all know when we're about to have a stressful conversation, practice it.
Yep.
Whether in the mirror, but even better with somebody else, so you get some sort of response back. And then you're really building your muscle memory for how that conversation should go and will go.
Yeah.
Because you've already done it. So pick one of those.
I love that. And I even have written it down before. I've gotten it out on my head and written it down so that I've processed it by the time I then have to kind of say it live. And I refer to my notes if I'm on the phone. I think it's all good stuff.
That's great.
So, all right, your EQ. We want you to check it out, see where you're at with it, some things that you might be able to do to enhance or make it even better, right?
Yes.
So make it a great Tuesday. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. But until then, remember, you got this.